year 1875, a man named Alexander P. Ashbourne patented a mechanical dough cutter that would change biscuit making forever, allowing biscuits to be produced at industrial scale for the first time in American history. And so today, we're ignoring the Industrial Revolution entirely and doing it by hand with sheep's milk. Because have you seen the price of store-bought biscuits lately? Like, really, I forgot to check the last time I went to the store. But in this economy, a good biscuit made from scratch is totally worth it. Hello, shepherds. Welcome back. And if you're new here, hello. This is where we talk all things sheepy. My name is Megan, and this recipe is pretty forgiving, unlike the grocery budget. So grab any of your backyard dairy animals, and let's get started. I'm using homemade cultured buttermilk, and if you're wondering what that means, instead of a deep dive, I made more of a puddle stomp video all about buttermilk. I'll link above, and this style of buttermilk is a bit thinner, it's lightly cultured. As the milk was cooling down, I just sprinkled in some C61 Meso Type 2 into it, and then let it ferment for a few hours. Overnight, actually. So let's go ahead and dive into it. This comes together pretty fast. So let's start by preheating our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 204 degrees Celsius. And then let's start off with our bowl of dries. We're going to add in around 2.5 cups or 381 grams of flour. Next, we want to add in our salt, about half a teaspoon or 2 grams. And then we have around 2.5 teaspoons or 9 grams of baking powder. And we also want to add in 1 tablespoon or 11 grams of our granulated sugar. And then we want to stir everything together to combine our dries in our bowl. This step's pretty important because it really prevents any extra mixing that we're going to have to do later on. And this really ensures we're going to have a buttery, soft, and tender biscuit. Next up, we're going to cut in our butter. Okay, so a lot of folks here call to use a pastry cutter or cubing your butter, and that can work and stuff. It's really important to work as cold as possible. And this is so we can work our butter in without melting it. I used to do that. I even bought a pastry cutter to make this work better, which I no longer own. But since those early days, I found a method that works so much simpler. So let's go ahead and grab our frozen butter. And for this step, I like to grate my frozen butter ahead of time. I'm using our sheep's butter, and even when it's frozen, it can soften too much even by handling alone. Even the grating action softens up our butter a little too much. So we're going to need either 1 commercial stick or 113 grams of butter. So we don't want to add our butter soft into our flour mix. So to make the best biscuits, it really helps to grate our butter frozen. And then with sheep's butter, it helps to store our grated sheep butter in the freezer about half an hour ahead of time, just so that when it comes to biscuit making, we can toss in our frozen butter shavings in till it's lightly coated in our flour mix. If you're using cow butter, it's a bit firmer and it doesn't melt as fast, so you can grate your frozen cow butter directly into the flour and not worry about any extra steps like tossing it in the freezer for a few minutes. If you want to toss in some grated cheese or herbs, now's a really good time to add them in. And so I find using butter frozen really makes that difference and gain that really beautiful lift and flaky pastry. So now that our butter is really well combined, let's go ahead and toss in our wets. We're going to add in 3/4 of a cup or 163 grams of buttermilk. If you don't have buttermilk substitutes or even milk works really well. For this recipe, we're using our cultured buttermilk to really amp up those flavors in our dough, rather than rely on the interaction of the buttermilk to create that lift. This will be a sticky dough at first, so on a flour surface, we want to roll our dough out to about, say, 3/4 of an inch or 2 to 3 centimeters thick. And then we want to fold it over maybe 2 or 3 times, nothing too particularly really. And then we're going to roll out our dough to about thumbnail thick, and then it's good to go. Let's go ahead and cut our shapes, and any shape can really do. I have a biscuit cutter that I've had for ages. It's pretty worn, but it manages to do its job pretty well. So let's go ahead and cut these out. And speaking of biscuit cutters, at this step is where Alexander Ashbourne revolutionized the biscuit business. Back when he worked in the food industry, he noticed how shaping and cutting biscuits was pretty diverse, and this really affected the cook times and their shapes of their products for each of these businesses. So he invented a sort of machine that cut all the biscuits out the same shape, the same size, and same thickness for the small businesses. So they were able to get everything done in the ways that were so much faster than before. Okay, now that our first biscuits are cut, I like to place them on the pan shoulder to shoulder. And then when our biscuits rise and lift up, they'll support each other to rise higher. Kind of like how the sheep like to stand on each other to reach higher branches, but for biscuits, and minus the leaves and tiny hooves. Okay, so now for the scraps, we're rolling them out and shaping them. They're gonna be pretty ugly, the way I shape them at least. They'll still taste good, but I try not to work them too much, so that they're gonna be ugly, but still light and flaky and delightful. And then for our final touch, we're gonna brush either some melted butter if you have on hand, or some softened butter on top of each biscuit. And then we want to pop them in our oven to cook for about 10 to 15 minutes. They tend to brown faster on the bottom than the top, so they look pretty ready right now. So I'm going to go ahead and pull them out. These biscuits are really hot. So I'm going to eat the ugly one first and then save the pretty ones for dinner later. With just a little pat of sheep's butter and a dab of lychee raspberry jelly. I just love jams and jellies, and they're so flavorful. And then combined with the buttery notes and the buttermilk, it really adds some complexity. Buttermilk is one of those things that you can tell more when it's missing because how flat the biscuits or breads taste. But in here, it's such a fun snack. And then for dinner later on, we're actually going to go more breakfast sandwich style. So we're going to add some eggs and bacon and then of course cheese. And then have the heat from the eggs melt the cheese into the biscuits. So it's something really fast and simple and really easy to make, especially on those work nights. So what's your favorite way to dress up your biscuits? Let me know below. And if you've made it this far, an extra special thank you. I appreciate you. I'm still working on a couple of those video requests. It's a bit of a slow process for me. I'm pretty slow. And my family member fixed my camera again. It keeps breaking, so hopefully I can get things out a little bit better. And thank you so much for watching. And if you're curious about more sheep milk recipes, stomp that subscribe button and bop that bell. Until next time, stay soft, stay fluffy, and most importantly, stay true to you. Ta-tas.